Resurrection Sunday is a marvelous day for all Christians, but on that very first Resurrection Sunday, the actual day of the resurrection that we read about in the New Testament, for the apostles, it was a pretty difficult day. It was a perplexing day. It was a day filled with confusion and just a lack of understanding of everything that was going on and difficulty processing it as it came to them. We read in John chapter 20 at verse 19, "Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, 'Peace with you.'" You read further in the next verse, when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad they saw the Lord. Two or three key phrases pop up in these two verses that we read, especially when you parallel it with Matthew, Mark, and Luke's account. But the Bible tells us here that it was the same day at evening, and that in the very next phrase, it is the first day of the week. John is very deliberate here to be redundant, stressing that it's the first day of the week because he's already said that in John 20, verse 1. Now he repeats it in verse 19. So we know that the resurrection was on the first day of the week, the day that we know as Sunday. But the first day of the week is stressed here. And then it says that they were in a place, the disciples were, and the doors were shut. Why? For fear of the Jews. I think I understand that because their leader had just been crucified. Who would they come after next? Well, probably these men who were the very closest to Jesus. So they were afraid. They didn't know what to think. They didn't know what to do. And then the text tells us Jesus came and stood in their midst. When you look at the other accounts, it says that at first they were terrified. They thought they had seen a ghost. And that's understandable because they thought Jesus was dead. Apparently, Jesus just sort of came through the wall, came through the door without actually walking through the door. He just appeared there. He really hadn't done anything like that in his ministry or with these men, but now he did. And the text tells us he shows them his hands and his side. They see the injuries. They know it's him. The other accounts tell us that when they first heard about the resurrection from Mary Magdalene and the other women, that they just weren't sure about that. They weren't sure they believed that. The other texts also tell us that Jesus had something to say about that and even rebuked the men. But now they're putting it all together. I think we shouldn't be too hard on the disciples here. This is pretty big stuff to try to comprehend. And as they're putting it together, the text tells us they were glad. They were glad to see Jesus. Notice what he had told them. Peace be to you. Will we hear those words from Jesus when we see him at the great resurrection day at the end of time? And most of all, on that day, will we be glad to see Jesus?